Russia's flying pancake fighter, the Su-47 that never soared. Imagine a fighter jet that looked like it belonged in a science fiction film. Sleek, aggressive, with wings pointing the wrong way. It was fast. It was agile. It even broke speed records in testing. And yet, it never saw combat, never went into mass production, and never soared above its prototype phase. This is the story of the Sukhoi Su-47 Berkut, Russia's bold and bizarre experimental jet, nicknamed the Flying Pancake by some Western observers for its unorthodox design. The Su-47 was supposed to be the future of Russian air power. Instead, it became one of the most spectacular aerospace what-ifs of the post-Cold War era. Let's break down how it happened, the dream, the engineering, the budget, the politics, the failure, and where things went right for others. In the 1980s, the Soviet Union wanted to leap ahead in air dominance. The MiG-29 and Su-27 had given the US Air Force something to think about. But they knew that the next leap in aerial warfare would be determined not just by speed or altitude, but by maneuverability, stealth, and electronic warfare. Enter Sukhoi's radical idea, a jet fighter with forward-swept wings. The concept had been tested before. The American X-29 program had experimented with it, but no one had dared to take it full scale. Sukhoi engineers believed that forward-swept wings, when paired with composite materials, would provide incredible agility, especially at high angles of attack. Perfect for dogfighting, perfect for air superiority, perfect for the sprawling skies over Russia's vast frontiers. Development officially kicked off in the early 1990s under the project name S-37, later renamed the Su-47 Berkut, meaning Golden Eagle in Russian. By the mid-1990s, the first prototype was built and began testing, and visually, it was a showstopper. The Su-47 featured forward-swept wings made of carbon fiber composites, twin vertical stabilizers canted outward for stability, canards near the cockpit to assist in pitch control, a massive internal weapons bay designed for stealthier missions, and a top speed of Mach 1.8. But this wasn't just about looks. The Berkut demonstrated unmatched performance during its early tests. Its agility was off the charts. It could turn tighter and maintain control at higher angles than any Russian aircraft that came before it. It could fly at 2,220 kilometers per hour. It had a service ceiling of 18,000 meters, and its combat radius was projected to be over 1,500 kilometers. Still, it had a problem, or rather several. By the late 1990s, Russia was a very different place. The Soviet Union was gone, the economy was struggling, defense budgets had been slashed, and the Su-47? It was very, very expensive. Estimates at the time placed the cost of a production-ready Su-47 fleet at over $70 million per aircraft, nearly double that of Su-30 or MiG-35. For context, Russia's entire annual defense budget in 1998 was around $20 billion. Just building a squadron of Su-47s could have eaten a significant chunk of that. There were also technical issues. Forward-swept wings were innovative, but they placed enormous torsional stress on the aircraft, meaning the wings had to be made from special composites. That drove up manufacturing costs and created concerns about long-term durability. And then there was the engine. The prototype used the same AL-31F engines as the Su-27. They weren't stealthy. They weren't optimized for supercruise, and they were already being outpaced by US jet propulsion. The Su-47 needed a better engine, but that would have meant billions more in R&D. In short, the idea was ahead of its time, and the country simply wasn't ready. Beyond the cost, the Su-47 faced a deeper challenge. It didn't fit into Russia's strategic doctrine. Russia has always leaned toward heavy multi-role aircraft. The Su-27, Su-30, and later Su-35 were all designed to be versatile, capable of air-to-air and air-to-ground roles, with endurance and firepower to match. The Su-47? It was an air superiority specialist. Agile, yes, but limited in payload and range compared to other multi-role fighters. In a post-Cold War world, Russia wanted jets that could bomb Chechnya, patrol over Syria, and intercept NATO jets over the Arctic, all in one platform. The Su-47's role was simply too narrow for a cash-strapped military with global ambitions. While the Su-47 faded into prototype limbo, other nations moved forward with next-gen fighters that actually made it off the ground. The F-22 Raptor, developed by Lockheed Martin, was America's own air superiority monster. With stealth, supercruise, and situational awareness far beyond any rival, the F-22 entered service in 2005 and remains unmatched in the sky today. Then came the F-35 Lightning II, a multi-role stealth fighter designed for global export. Despite its own cost overruns, the F-35 is now deployed by over 17 nations and is expected to be the dominant platform through 2070. China too joined the race with the Chengdu J-20, a twin-engine stealth jet that prioritizes long-range missile engagement. It's already operational and being mass-produced. Even India has progressed, slowly, with its Tejas program and now plans to develop the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft, or AMCA. Compared to these, the Su-47 became something of a forgotten relic, an engineering showpiece with nowhere to go. So what happened to the one flying Su-47 prototype? It wasn't mothballed. It wasn't turned into scrap. Instead, it became a test bed. Sukhoi used the Su-47 to test new materials, avionics systems, and control surfaces. The lessons learned from its composite structure and internal weapon bay helped inform later Russian aircraft, particularly the Su-57 Felon. Yes, that's the aircraft that eventually replaced the Su-47's dreams. A stealthy, fifth-generation fighter designed to compete with the F-22 and F-35. But even the Su-57 has faced its share of delays and doubts. As of 2024, only around 24 Su-57s have been delivered, well short of Russia's original goals. Ironically, the Su-47 may have had more influence behind the scenes than it ever had in the skies. Let's be clear, the Su-47 was a masterpiece of aerodynamic innovation, but it was a doctrinal misfit. Russia, in both Soviet and post-Soviet eras, has preferred fighters that are rugged, exportable, and multi-role. That's why the Su-30, Su-35, and even the MiG-29 have seen more love from Moscow, and more orders from overseas buyers. The Su-47? Too specialized, too fragile, too expensive, and not export-friendly. Whereas the Su-35 could be marketed to China and India, and the MiG-29 became the workhorse of dozens of countries, the Su-47 was always going to be a niche product. Even its stealth wasn't fully developed. Its radar cross-section was reduced, but not at the level of Western 5th-gen fighters. Pinning down exact costs for Russian black-budget projects is tricky, but here's what analysts believe. The Su-47 program cost between $1.5 and $2 billion in total development spending. That includes R&D, prototype construction, and testing over a 15-year span. Compare that to the F-22's $66 billion price tag, or the F-35's projected $1.7 trillion lifetime cost. From that perspective, the Su-47 was cheap, but it also delivered very little operational output. It was a billion-dollar proof of concept, a flying lab, a beautiful prototype whose wings never truly spread. A senior Sukhoi engineer speaking anonymously in a 2006 Russian aviation journal put it bluntly. The Su-47 was an aircraft ahead of its time, but also ahead of its funding. Russian military analyst Viktor Markovsky wrote in Red Star Weekly, "Berkut was not just a plane, it was a message that Russia could still innovate, but innovation without investment is simply theater." Even former U.S. Air Force Chief of Staff General John Jumper once remarked, "The Su-47 was beautiful, but never stood a chance against funding realities." In another universe, had Russia's economy been stronger, had the Cold War never ended, or had global defense spending remained at its 1980s peak, the Su-47 might have been a real rival to the F-22. Imagine squadrons of forward-swept fighters screaming across the Arctic, intercepting bombers, and dodging missiles with impossible turns. It would have changed the balance of power, and perhaps extended Russia's air dominance well into the 21st century. But that's not what happened. Instead, we're left with a single majestic jet locked in hangars and grainy YouTube footage, a flying pancake that was more dream than machine. The Su-47 Berkut is one of the most fascinating almost stories in modern military aviation. It had vision, it had technology, it had wow factor, but it never had money, never had strategic backing, and never had a role that matched Russia's shifting military properties. So while the F-22, the J-20, and the F-35 now shape the skies, the Su-47 remains grounded in history, remembered not for what it achieved, but for what it could have been. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most haunting legacy of all.